Hey everyone, welcome to my brand new YouTube channel and a series called Rate That Reign, where we look back at wrestlers' championship reigns and see how they compare to the all-time greats. I have created a list of what I believe are the 10 most important variables to determine the success of a WWE championship reign, and we'll be basing all of the rankings on these 10 categories. If you're a fan of wrestling history and you want to see how your favourite champions stack up, you're in the right place. So hit that subscribe button, because we've got a lot more rankings coming your way. For our first episode, we're diving into the reign of none other than Jack Swagger, the All-American American who held the WWE World Heavyweight Championship in 2010. While this reign isn't exactly legendary, it's definitely one worth talking about. Jack Swagger won the Money in the Bank ladder match at WrestleMania 26 by defeating 9 other men, including Christian, Kane, Drew McIntyre and Shelton Benjamin. And on just the following SmackDown, he would cash in his briefcase on an injured Chris Jericho to win the World Heavyweight Championship. So let's see whether Swagger was a champ or a chump, and how his reign stacks up in our leaderboard. Let's break it down. First up, let's talk about Swagger's worthiness as a champion. This section will look at what he had been doing in the prior weeks to his victory to see if he was the right choice as a champion. Jack Swagger had pretty much been a mid-carder up until this point, although he had previously won the not-so-prestigious ECW Championship back in 2009. Swagger started his year off by losing the number 1 contender's fatal 4-way match for the United States Championship to MVP. Later on that month, he'd entered the Royal Rumble at number 26, lasting just over 2 minutes and failing to make any eliminations in that time. The following night on Raw, Swagger would lose an Elimination Chamber qualifying match to Triple H before defeating Santino Marella, earning him his spot in the Money in the Bank ladder match at WrestleMania. To say that his build to becoming Mr. Money in the Bank was underwhelming would probably be quite an understatement. On top of this, WWE's decision to have him cash in less than 7 days after the victory didn't really allow enough time for his character to be built up as a credible champion. For this reason, I'm going to have to give Swagger a 2 out of 10 for his worthiness as a champion. Next up, we're revisiting the championship victory to see how he won the big gold belt. On the SmackDown after WrestleMania, Jericho stood in the ring with taped up ribs after being speared by Edge through the barrier at WrestleMania. Jericho cuts a promo gloating about his win over Edge at Mania when Edge comes down the ramp to confront him, and Edge beats him up a little bit before hitting him with a spear on the bandaged ribs. As Edge heads back up the ramp, out comes Swagger with his briefcase. Swagger gets in the ring and awkwardly waits around for some more for a referee to finally come out. A referee finally comes down and does the weird, what do you want me to do with this thing spot that they always seem to do, as if they've never seen a Money in the Bank briefcase before. After a good amount of time's passed, with Jericho still selling the spear like he's been hit by a car or something, the bell rings, Swagger hits his gut-wrench powerbomb and gets the 3 count. In my opinion, this whole segment wasn't really that great, and it probably could have done with more of an attack by Edge to justify the level of selling by Jericho for such a long time. Also, the long wait for a referee just made it seem a bit more clunky than it should have, and it really took the pop out of what should have been an exciting moment for the crowd. I'd have to give this one a 3 out of 10, because while it did have a bit of surprise value, it didn't really feel like the crowning of a new top guy. Now it's time for the beefy part of the video, the full reign recap. So let's recap the World Heavyweight Championship reign of Jack Swagger. The next Raw following the cash-in, Swagger's in the middle of the ring cutting a heel promo when he's suddenly interrupted by none other than John Cena. Cena congratulates Swagger on the win, but questions whether he's earned the right to be a world champion, and challenges him to a match tonight, even offering to put his WWE Championship on the line. Randy Orton then comes out, followed by The Miz and The Big Show, who get interrupted by guest host David Otunga from NXT. Otunga sets up a match between Swagger and Orton tonight, whilst The Big Show and Miz will face Cena and himself. John Cena and David Otunga as a tag team, that'll never work out, surely. Huh? Swagger and Orton go on to have a decent match, which ends in Orton reversing the gut-wrench powerbomb into an RKO for the win. Having the champion losing his first match after winning probably wasn't the best way to get him over and to kickstart the championship reign, even if it was against Randy Orton. Swagger's first title defense would come in a triple threat against former champ Chris Jericho and his current rival Edge. The match starts with Swagger and Jericho forming a brief alliance to double team Edge, however that doesn't really take long for the partnership to break down. Edge throws both opponents out the ring and performs a double baseball slide. Jericho attempts but fails a lion salt, leading to Edge hitting the Edge-O-Matic for a 2 count. Edge goes for the spear, which is reversed into the walls of Jericho. Swagger tries to break the hold but gets put in the walls himself. Jericho then hits Swagger with a code breaker, forcing him to roll out of the ring. Jericho goes for a spear on Edge, who jumps over him, rebounds off the ropes and hits a spear of his own onto Jericho. Before Edge can get the pin on Jericho, Swagger pulls him out of the ring and gets the pin for himself. I thought it was a fun, exciting match, but Swagger hardly had any input or offense. On top of this, he looked very lucky to get the win, stealing the pin from Edge. He spent loads of time on the outside and was barely portrayed as being dominant. I get it's a heelish kind of win, but after the Orton loss, he really could have done with something a bit more convincing than this. Next week, Swagger would come out and issue an open challenge, which gets accepted by The Undertaker, who would defeat him in a 15-minute match with a chokeslam followed by a tombstone. As if this wasn't bad enough, on SmackDown, Swagger loses a match to John Morrison to start the show. Swagger's next title defense would come out at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view against Randy Orton in an Extreme Rules match. The match starts out pretty slow-paced and definitely not extreme or violent. Nearly 9 minutes into the 14-minute match, the first weapon gets brought in. Swagger goes for a Swagger bomb off the ropes, but Orton grabs the title and hits Swagger in the ribs with his own belt. I thought this looked pretty good, to be fair. Swagger starts to get a trash can from under the ring, but Orton is the one who manages to land 2 nasty looking shots to Swagger's head using it. Randy hits a stomp to Swagger's head on the steps and is complete control here. Back in the ring, Randy hits a draping DDT to Swagger before setting up a chair in the ring. Orton goes to hit an RKO onto Swagger on top of the chair, but Swagger reverses and instead Randy lands on the chair. Swagger then hits the gut wrench powerbomb and gets the pinfall victory. Another decent match here, but nothing particularly noteworthy. Not a worthy match or feud to necessitate being an Extreme Rules match, but I guess that was just WWE at the time. The Raw after Extreme Rules was the 2010 WWE Draft. The show starts off with Show Miz losing the tag titles to the Hart Dynasty, leading to the pair splitting up. This will come in handy later on, don't worry. Later on in the show, CM Punk defeats Evan Bourne to win a pick for SmackDown. This would then lead up to being the Big Show being drafted to SmackDown. On the next SmackDown, Big Show's backstage and he knocks out both Jericho and Edge in separate segments, seemingly being a heel, but then of course would turn face later on in the show, as he's announced by Teddy Long to be the #1 contender to Jack Swagger's world title. Big Show and Swagger have a face-off and Swagger gets hit with a KO punch to end the show. In the main event of the following week's SmackDown, Jack Swagger would take on Kane in a non-title match. Before the match gets underway, Swagger cuts a promo listing off various accolades about himself. Swagger's promo would eventually get cut off by Kane's pyro and music, and the match would get underway. About a minute into the match, Big Show comes down to the ring and sits at the commentary desk. Swagger goes over to the corner and removes the turnbuckle pad. Kane hits the top rope clothesline and sets up the chokeslam. Swagger reverses this and Irish whips Kane into the exposed corner. This causes the ref to call for a DQ after Swagger repeatedly hits Kane's head off the exposed turnbuckle. This was such an underwhelming finish to the match and got absolutely no crowd reaction. Even the Big Show on commentary isn't sure if the match is over. Swagger and the Big Show would then have a face-off at the commentary desk, but Swagger turns into a big boot from Kane. This is followed by Big Show chokeslamming him through the announce table. Yet again, Swagger ends up looking like an idiot. He ends up on the receiving end of a beatdown and he's looking at the lights when the show ends. Big Show gets in the ring and holds the world title over his shoulders. With the Big Show feud well underway and the match set for Over the Limit, Swagger cuts a promo in the ring while surrounded by trophies, medals and pictures showing off his many awards in amateur wrestling and football. This is pretty much just your typical heel promo with pretty little substance to it. This goes on for an agonizing 10 whole minutes before the Big Show comes down to the ring, and in clumsy Big Show fashion, accidentally breaks a few of his trophies. Big Show starts dancing with one of Swagger's trophies before hitting it on the floor, snapping it in half. Swagger gets thrown out of the ring as Big Show proceeds to wreck all of his accomplishments. And what does Swagger do while seeing his life's work being destroyed in front of him? He stands there with his hands on his head, doing nothing of course. I really don't know what WWE were trying to achieve here by making your world champion look like an absolute tool who's incapable of defending himself, winning matches, cutting promos, or even looking somewhat dominant. This segment was absolutely awful. It sums up the whole feud. Bit of a spoiler, it's not going to get any better. Thankfully, Swagger's next match would be on Raw, where Edge had the ability to choose any opponent for Randy Orton, and for some reason thought that Jack Swagger might be a credible threat. He's obviously not watching SmackDown. Swagger actually gives a decent account of himself in this match, but ultimately gets hit with a scoop slam and then a draping DDT. As Randy Orton sets up for the RKO, Edge runs in and interferes. Swagger gets the DQ win over Orton, but ends up getting hit with an RKO anyway, of course he does, just to solidify his lack of threat on the WWE roster. I seriously don't think that there has ever been a reigning champion that looks this useless week after week after week. It's crazy to think that the current World Heavyweight Champion is being used as some kind of a tune-up match or a plot device to further a feud on the other brand that doesn't even involve the world title. It's finally time for the world title match at Over the Limit, where Swagger defends against the Big Show. The match begins with Swagger trying to go for a takedown but getting thrown about the ring. Big Show hits a loud chop in the corner and then proceeds to step on Jack Swagger's back. Totally in control so far. He goes for a choke slam, but Swagger manages to escape and roll out of the ring. When he re-enters the ring, Swagger hits some diving shoulder blocks which gets Big Show onto the mat. Swagger hits a double Swagger bomb and then goes for a pin. Big Show kicks out at 2 and does the kick out where he sends Jack Swagger going flying through the ropes to the outside. At this point, Swagger goes to get his world title from the Timekeeper's area, heads back into the ring and hits Big Show with it for the DQ. The ref rings his bell and Swagger retains the championship. Such an underwhelming match to be building to for a whole month. After the bell, Swagger continues his attack with the belt and hits a few chair shots too. Big Show gets up pretty soon after though, dodges another chair shot and hits the chokeslam twice, with the second being on top of a chair. Referees and doctors have to carry Swagger up the ramp. So even when he manages to retain his title, Swagger still ends up on the wrong side of a beating, limping up the ramp. I'm still yet to see any sort of reasoning as to why he was made world champion. Seriously, what was the point in him cashing in if this was what he was going to do? So, despite being portrayed as intimidating as Jimmy Wang Yang, Swagger still remained the WWE World Heavyweight Champion, which means he needed to defend his title at the next pay-per-view, provided he lasted that long. Teddy Long made an announcement on SmackDown that the following pay-per-view would be called Fatal 4-Way, meaning that Swagger would have to defend his title against 3 other opponents. Since the match against the Big Show ended in a DQ, he was automatically added to the match, which left 2 more spaces to be filled by either CM Punk, Kane, Rey Mysterio or The Undertaker. CM Punk would end up defeating Kane to earn a spot at the match, and The Undertaker would beat Rey. So the match was settled. It would be Swagger defending against CM Punk, Big Show and The Undertaker, right? Well, to start next week's SmackDown, Teddy Long announced that The Undertaker had been found in a vegetative state. As a result of this, Kane vowed to avenge The Undertaker and would try to figure out who was behind this attack. Spoiler alert, it was himself. But that's another story for another time. Kane would spend the rest of the show accusing Swagger, Big Show and even Rey Mysterio of attacking The Undertaker, while a battle royal is held to determine the replacement for The Undertaker's spot in the Fatal 4-Way match. The final 2 in this one are Kane and Mysterio, with the match ending after Rey hits a Hurricane Rana to Kane, sending him over the top rope. So the Fatal 4-Way match is Swagger, Big Show, Mysterio and Punk. On the Go Home show for Fatal 4-Way, Swagger and Punk will team against Rey and Big Show. Before the match, Swagger gets interviewed backstage saying that the other 3 competitors' names will all be forgotten in time, whereas the name Jack Swagger will never be forgotten. This really couldn't have been further from the truth. Swagger gets tagged in and lands a Swagger bomb on Rey. Swagger then reverses a chokeslam from the Big Show into a DDT. Rey gets tagged in but misses a crossbody, leading to a gut wrench powerbomb from Swagger. Rey counters that into some sort of maneuver for the win. After the match, Kane runs in and chokeslams everybody. Now it's finally time for Swagger's 4th and thankfully final title defense. The match gets underway with Swagger and Punk forming a temporary alliance to beat up Rey Mysterio, but both get pushed away by the Big Show. Rey goes for Punk's mask and Punk is thrown to the outside. Mysterio avoids a big boot from Big Show and slides out of the ring, only for the Big Show to pick him up by the head and launch him at Swagger, sending him off the apron. Punk and Rey hit a nice double baseball slide to send the Big Show out of the ring, but then end up getting hit with a double clothesline from Swagger. Swagger then manages to hit both Ray and Punk with a double German suplex, which honestly has to be the best thing that he's done in this entire video. Ray gets Punk onto the ropes for a 619, but as he swings around, he's caught by the Big Show and is slammed into the announce desk. Ray kicks the steel steps into Big Show's legs and hits a 619 using the ring post. Back in the ring, Punk gets the GTS on Swagger and looks like he's got the match won when Kane comes down to the ring, wheeling a casket down the ramp. Punk ends up getting chokeslammed into the casket, with Gallows having to make the save before both men run to the back and seemingly out of the match. Amongst all that interference, Rey Mysterio successfully lands a 619 to Swagger and picks up the win and the World Heavyweight Championship. In the months that would follow the title loss, Swagger would lose a rematch to Rey Mysterio at Money in the Bank before losing a number 1 contenders match to Rey Mysterio a week later after Kane cashed in his briefcase on Rey. Swagger would then eventually fall back down to the mid-card, appearing for Team SmackDown at Bragging Rights and losing a King of the Ring qualifier match to Kofi Kingston later on in the year. So how about the length of his reign? Well, Swagger's reign lasted for 82 days, which is a fair amount of time for a world champion, and just about long enough to establish a character. However, probably not enough time to truly build any kind of lasting legacy or to tell any long-term stories. I'd have to give this one a 4 out of 10, pretty decent. Now it's time to talk about arguably the most important variable in determining a good championship reign, that's being the quality of their matches. Jack Swagger had a total of 16 televised matches during his reign, varying in quality from decent to awful. Two of the best matches of the reign were the Triple Threat and the Fatal 4-Way, which, to be honest with you, both probably would have been just as good without him being there. He had some awful matches against Kane, and the DQ against the Big Show was terrible. So I can't really rate the quality of his matches too highly here. I'm going to have to give him a 3 out of 10, I'm afraid. To put it nicely, Jack Swagger's promo abilities were subpar. He simply lacked the charisma and the personality to be convincing in his role as a champion. He got a decent amount of reaction from the fans, but this was mainly down to the repetitive substance of his promos. I feel like giving him a manager or a mouthpiece would have significantly improved the perception of his character and filled in for a notable weak spot of his. For the quality and substance of his promos, I'm giving Swagger a 2 out of 10. So what about the storylines and angles that took place during this reign? Well, the angles that took place in and out of Swagger's title reign were absolutely terrible. From the title defense against Randy Orton that was set up by David Hasselhoff of all people, to the 5-minute DQ against the Big Show, all the way to the Undertaker's vegetative state. The storylines at this point were just awful. I get that a lot of this era of WWE was just a bit crap, but this is really something else. So again, I'm giving him a 2 out of 10, yeah, just terrible. The next variable in our rankings is the frequency of title defenses, which in the case of this reign was 4 times in the space of 82 days. This averages out to 1 title defense every 20.5 days. But where does the 20.5 days compare to against the rest? To figure this out, I compared this reign with a reign that was notorious for having hardly any defenses, and another reign that was notorious for having many defenses, those being Brock Lesnar's Universal title reign in 2017 and John Cena's US title reign from 2015. Brock's Universal title reign had 7 defenses in 504 days, or an average of 72 days per defense, while Cena's reign had 15 defenses across 147 days, or 1 defense every 9.8 days. Whilst I know both examples are at extreme ends of the spectrum, it gives us a good benchmark for where to place Swagger's reign. I'm going to give him a respectable 5 out of 10 for this one of the positives to his time as a champion. Next up, let's look at the crowd reaction that Swagger got during his time as a champion. The crowd reaction was a bit mixed. He definitely wasn't one of the all-time heel champions, but to say that he had no reaction at all just wouldn't be a fair assessment either. There were certain promos and segments he did that did actually get a decent amount of heat or crowd response, so I'd have to give him a 3 out of 10 for this. Now it's time to assess Jack Swagger's win percentage as a champion. This is where it gets pretty interesting. Having a high win percentage is of course a good thing when establishing a dominant champion and can contribute significantly to the credibility of a championship reign. This is, in my opinion, one of the main reasons why I think Jack Swagger's reign was just so disappointing. Over the course of his reign, Swagger had 16 televised matches, winning a total of just 5. This gives him a shockingly low 31% win rate. This is an incredibly disappointing figure, and for this reason he has to get a 1 out of 10 for his win percentage. And finally, let's look at the memorability of Jack Swagger's reign. What good is having a championship reign if nobody remembers it? Well, as previously stated, Swagger was not one of the all-time heel champions, and was in fact quite far from it. I've tried to ensure that my score for this variable is based on being memorable for good reasons instead of being notoriously bad. Swagger's reign isn't quite in that notorious category yet, along with maybe Jinder Mahal or Vince McMahon, but his title reign is still remembered by some as being there with some of the worst. So for this reason, I'm going to have to give him a 3 out of 10 for memorability. So let's wrap this video up and give Swagger his all-important Rate That Reign score out of 100. Adding the numbers up gives us a grand total of 28 out of 100. Quite an underwhelming score for an undoubtedly underwhelming reign. I think that if WWE allowed him to hold on to his briefcase for just a little bit longer to build him up as more of a credible threat, then things could have gone a lot differently. He's full of potential and a pretty good in-ring worker, capable of having, at the very worst, a decent match. So Jack Swagger's the first to make it onto our list, and therefore he is the score to beat. How long will that take? Well, make sure you subscribe to the channel and be sure to watch the next video to find out. Who do you want to see get ranked next? Leave a comment down below and let me know. I've been Kane, and I'll see you next time.